Have you ever been on a ghost tour? So this summer, we went on a ghost tour in San Antonio, Texas. And I want to give a shout out to the company that actually took us on the ghost tour. And the Sisters Grimm Ghost Tours in San Antonio, Texas did a fantastic job, especially Lady Lex, our tour guide, who made the experience so worthwhile. So if you're looking to get spooked and in the San Antonio area, make sure you give them a shout out. During the tour though, I wonder if scientists ever thought about the afterlife, because in my opinion, we're born, we live, and then we pass on. We demand a sequel. So on this episode of the ARQIV, I want to ask one thing. Does something survive us? Or are ghosts just the brain's final echo? And does science have any answers about the beyond? Imagine holding a tablet in your hand, etched with strange symbols, and it's over 3,000 years old. On it, a stick figure with wild eyes being led away on a rope. That, as far as we know it, is humanity's oldest illustrated ghost. It comes from ancient Babylon, a time when people didn't just fear the dead, but they actually kind of gave them instructions. Now I want you to fast forward a few thousand years, and you have the ancient Egyptians pack their tombs kind of like a cosmic carry-on guide with charms and maps and even maps of the underworld. And don't forget, we also have stories about the Greeks. I mean, they sent souls on ferries across the river Styx to get to the other side. And lastly, even medieval Christians invented purgatory because apparently eternity needed a waiting room. Go figure. And by the 1800s, we were holding seances in candlelit parlors while telegram machines tapped in the next room. It's almost like humanity was trying to always upgrade its ghost hardware. But today, it's EMF detectors and TikToks about shadowy people in bathroom mirrors. The ghosts haven't changed, but the format has. But did you know it's not just humans who mourn? In Bengal, elephants have been seen burying their dead, pushing soil with their trunks and standing vigil for days. There's even grief there, it seems. But is there belief? And that right there is the line. Some cognitive scientists say animals may understand when life ends, but not what happens after. Though I'm not sure if they actually asked the elephants that question when they were doing the research, but just go with me on it, okay? We, however, seem incapable of letting it end. We perform funerals, we create rituals, and we have offerings. In one controversial study in 2025, it even suggested our small-brained evolutionary cousins, the Homo nodali, might have buried its dead 250,000 years ago. So we don't just fear death, we tell ourselves stories to make it kind of less final. And maybe those stories helped us survive. So now psychologists call this terror management theory. It's the idea that you believe in something bigger and the panic shrinks. So maybe ghost stories weren't just superstition, maybe they were kind of like psychological armor. But just because an idea comforts us, does it make it true? That's the big question. A few days before my wife's grandfather passed away, his name was Papo, and he was a person I greatly admired and even named my son after. He had some strange moments before he passed away last year. So the last few days before Papo passed away were really eye-opening for me. I've never experienced being there like that. He had mentioned he had people in the room with him, except he didn't mean, people. He said there were angels that were standing in the corner. They were laughing and smiling. It almost felt like he was describing a party, or in my mind, even more, kind of like a welcome home. Now, the nurses that were there, they didn't blink an eye at any of this. They told us that's actually normal at this time, and they knew that it wouldn't be long before he would pass. But I thought, normal? I mean, we have angels in the room, celestial celebrations, but honestly, it turns out he was far from alone in that respect. In hospice care facilities around the world, nearly 9 out of 10 patients report vivid dreams or waking visions in the final days or weeks of life. And often, they see people they once loved or people who had already passed on. And these visions are usually very peaceful. very comforting. Now, there's a doctor by the name of Christopher Kerr. He's a palliative care physician who studied over 1,000 end-of-life cases. And he says these visions often become more vivid as the passing approaches. And what's fascinating about all of this? People who were confused or disoriented due to illness, sometimes even those with severe dementia, can all of a sudden become clear, lucid even. They speak with purpose, they say goodbye. This phenomena has a name also. It's called terminal lucidity. And it's honestly baffling because it shouldn't happen. The brain is breaking down, and in some cases, parts of it are permanently damaged. But for a few fleeting minutes or even hours, something sharpens like a dying candle flaring bright one last time. And in one large survey of dementia caregivers, over 40% said they witnessed this moment of profound clarity just before the end. And scientists even have some theories about it. One, they say, is chemical. In the final stages, the brain may release a cascade of neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, even natural opioids. That chemical cocktail could actually temporarily wake up areas of the brain that had gone quiet. It might even explain why people report seeing vivid scenes or hearing music or feeling joy. Another theory involves something called cortical disinhibition. Think of it like the brakes failing on your internal reality filter. It's kind of like letting all of the images and memories and emotions come pouring into your mind. But even when we explain how it happens, it doesn't fully explain what people are seeing or how they actually see it consistently. I mean, describe it as being greeted, or others describe it as seeing doors, or hearing music that no one else in the room can hear. More importantly, feeling a warmth, not always physical, but emotional. And most of these visions are not actually scary. In fact, over 60% of patients say the visions brought them peace and helped them let go. Only a small fraction, less than 1 in 5, report fear or confusion, which raises a fascinating possibility. What if these visions are not glitches, but features of an evolved part of your brain and how it helps you pass on? Something kind of like built into the human brain to ease our departure, kind of like a final kindness and goodbye. All right, let's head to the edge. When the heart stops, what happens to the mind? You expect everything to go dark, kind of like lights off and end of story. But in some cases, the story doesn't just end there. In 2023, researchers at the University of Michigan observed something remarkable. 4 comatose patients had their life support removed, and 2 of them actually showed a final flare, a burst of high-frequency gamma waves. The kind linked to consciousness, memory, and awareness. And this activity, it didn't occur before the heart stopped. It actually occurred after the heart stopped. In another case, an 87-year-old man showed a coordinated brain rhythm lasting nearly 30 seconds after his heart had flatlined. And this isn't just a human phenomenon. In earlier lab studies, rats experienced a similar burst of synchronized gamma activity after cardiac arrest. So evolution doesn't waste energy, right? So why would a brain light up the moment it's shutting down? And some scientists say it's just chaos, just random misfires as oxygen drops, but others argue the patterns are too organized, too intentional, like the brain is reviewing something or replaying something, or maybe letting go. Now that matches what people describe during something called a near-death experience, or NDE. 1 in 10 cardiac arrest survivors say they saw or felt something like a tunnel. I think we've all heard of that. Or a light, or a reunion, or something like a life review. And the details may change by culture, but the structure remains the same. Americans, for instance, we see lost relatives, and in India, they see spiritual messengers called yamduts. But in both cases, they return changed. Scientists have tried to replicate these visions in controlled settings. So when oxygen drops, the visual cortex, your brain's image processor, it can actually produce tunnel-like visions. The temporal parietal junction, which helps you track where you are in space, it can glitch, creating the feeling of floating above your body. And low doses of ketamine can actually simulate all of it. The tunnel, the peace, the disconnection. But still, for those who've been there, these experiences feel more real than life itself. And science may be closing in on a possible reason why. There's a molecule. It's naturally produced in some plants and animals, and possibly in the human brain, that also may be responsible for the visions people describe at the edge of death. It's called DMT, dimethyltryptamine, a psychedelic compound so intense some users describe it as dying and coming back. In Greek mythology, there was Charon, the ferryman of souls, who rowed the dead across the river Styx. But what if the real ferryman is actually inside us? A 2008 study published in Frontiers in Psychology proposed that DMT might be released near the moment of death, creating a state that feels identical to near-death experience. And now in 2023, another study, it took it just a little bit further. It compared a man's NTE with a separate experience he had on DMT, a close chemical cousin. The two were nearly indistinguishable. And we're talking about light, ego loss, the sense of entering another realm. So both experiences left him feeling transformed. So maybe our brains don't just misfire as we die, maybe they guide us somewhere, either chemically or biologically, even metaphorically. Is that just an illusion, or is chemistry the tool our consciousness uses to initiate the exit stage? Next up, let's talk about out-of-body experiences. If the brain surges after the heart stops, is it just noise, or is it the mind's final broadcast? So I want you to do something with me. Close your eyes. Unless you're driving, then, by all means, don't close your eyes. But imagine this. You're lying completely still. Maybe it's during meditation. Maybe you're drifting between sleep and a state of wakefulness, kind of half dreaming, half aware. And your body is heavy. Your limbs won't move. And then there's a strange sensation. You feel like you're rising. Not flying, but kind of floating. You become aware of your own body as if it's across the room. I mean, you can see it, you can hear everything around it, but you're not in it at all. That is actually how thousands of people describe what's called an out-of-body experience, or OBE. Some report it during moments of intense trauma, others during sleep paralysis, others during deep meditation or extreme stress. But they can do this with just clever manipulations. Basically, how your senses talk to each other. And your sense of self-location when they do this actually starts to really unravel. But that's where it gets even weirder. You don't have to pass on to feel this. In fact, researchers have induced this feeling in perfectly healthy people using nothing more than virtual reality and a tilting platform. So scientists at the ARQIV Polytechnic Federale in Switzerland actually ran a simple but very powerful experiment with volunteers who put on a virtual reality headset while their bodies were gently tilted back and forth. But in the headset, they saw themselves from behind floating. Now, within minutes, many of them reported feeling like their consciousness had actually lifted, like they were outside of their physical bodies, observing from above. No near-death event required, no trauma, just really a trick of the senses. And they weren't hallucinating. Their brains were just reacting to conflicting information. What the eyes were seeing in this case didn't match what the body was feeling, and the results? The brain did what it always does. It created a story that made sense of it. You must be outside your body thinks. And this isn't new. In one famous case, a patient undergoing brain surgery was actually awake and fully conscious but under local anesthesia. When the neurosurgeon applied a tiny electrical current to a region of the brain called the temporal parietal junction, which we talked about earlier, the patient suddenly cried out, "I'm floating! I can see myself from above!" One spot in the brain, one tiny pulse, and the self is gone. But it does raise a powerful question. If your self can move without your body, how real is the location of your awareness at all? It turns out your sense of self is surprisingly fragile, and researchers have mapped over 200 papers on this phenomenon, and most agree. Well, out-of-body experiences can happen anytime your brain gets confused about where your body is in space. It's like your brain is running a live GPS feed, and sometimes the signal can get a little scrambled. So when people say they left their bodies during surgery or trauma, it doesn't prove anything supernatural actually happened, but it also doesn't mean they're flying. The experience is actually real. The explanations, however, are still under construction. All right, everybody, we're just gonna pause the ghost talk for just a second and focus on something even harder to define. And that something is you. More specifically, the voice you hear in your head right now as you speak.
So here we are. You know what you should do if you got this far. Maybe smash that subscribe button and drop me a comment about the episode. You are already a legend.
That's consciousness. It's awareness, attention, the spark that makes the difference between being alive and being here in the moment. But what is it really? Now, science has two main theories fighting for dominance in this space. The first says your brain is like a broadcasting station. Thoughts compete for attention and the loudest signal gets pushed to the front. It's called the Global Neuronal Workspace Theory, or as I like to call it, GNWT, also known as WIT. The second theory says consciousness emerges from how tightly information is woven together in your brain. Think of it like a fabric. The richer the weave, the more vivid the experience. That one's called integrated information theory. In 2025, researchers put these two ideas into a kind of scientific cage match, if you will. 12 labs across the globe studied the brain activity of over 250 people while they slipped in and out of states of wakefulness, dreaming, and anesthesia. And what happened? What were the results of this crazy cage match? Neither theory won. But something fascinating did show up. Most of the action, those sparks of consciousness activity, weren't happening in the logical frontal part of the brain where we assumed it would happen. They were actually flaring in the back, the visual areas or the spatial zones. So maybe the self, as we describe it, doesn't sit in the captain's chair of your brain giving orders. Maybe it's just light flickering in a complex circuit that we just don't fully understand yet. Here's what consciousness probably is not. It's not a gland. Descartes once guessed the soul lived in a small pinecone-shaped part of your brain called the pineal gland. Obviously, he was wrong. It's also not exclusive to humans. Our brainy friends of the sea, the octopuses, they solve puzzles. And artificial intelligence, it's been known to pass bar exams.
Please state your relationship with the defendant.
He was my business partner.
But the big question is, are they aware or just mimicking intelligence like a parrot saying,
I love you.
At least I think that's what I was trying to say, but if it did say it, it would say it without meaning. And here's the things that get a little messy. Let's say your consciousness is a complex system. Does that mean one day we could just upload it, back it up like a phone, or maybe it could kind of drift like data in a network, forming what some might interpret as a ghost? Scientists are asking some huge questions right now, though. Is consciousness continuous, or does it blink on and off like movie frames? Does complexity create awareness, or just better illusions? And if awareness doesn't rely on biology, could it survive outside the brain entirely? Maybe. But what happens when the lights do go out, when the heart stops and the brain starts its shutdown sequence? Now, I want you to imagine a table covered in gadgets. There's a black plastic box with blinking green lights. It's called an EMF meter. And beside it is a handheld radio that rapidly clicks through static. It's known as a spirit box. There's also a laser pointer grid, a thermal imaging scope, and a digital recorder preloaded with obviously eerie static. If you've ever watched a ghost hunting show, you've seen this gear. But the question is, do any of those types of gadgets actually work? Can they actually detect ghosts in the room? Or are we just measuring the hauntedness of bad wiring? So the EMF meter, from my understanding, detects electromagnetic fields, the kind produced by things like power strips or cell phones, and even, refrigerators. So paranormal investigators often wave it around in a dark basement and cheer when it spikes. But here's the thing. Your microwave also does that too. And honestly, so does your Wi-Fi router. There's one interesting study, though, where a researcher named Michael Persinger used a device called the God Helmet. He exposed people to low-frequency EMFs directed at their temporal lobes, and many of them reported feeling a presence. Some felt watched and others felt touched. A few even cried. But it took very specific frequencies and positioning to make that happen. Not just wandering around a creepy building with like a loose meter, but actually creating this inside your mind. Next, we have the spirit box. It basically scans AM and FM radio frequencies, spitting out these fragments of words, music, and static. The idea is that ghosts can manipulate those fragments into messages. But here's the thing, our brains, they are desperate to find patterns, especially in noise. It's called apophenia. That's the reason we see faces in clouds or hear, "Get out!" in the middle of a garbled radio fuzz. And the more you believe, the easier it is to hear what you're expecting to hear. And now let's talk about the infamous ghost orb. You've seen them, these glowing orbs that are floating across security cam footage or old photos. But honestly, 9 out of 10 of them, these orbs that you're seeing, are just dust or pollen or droplets of moisture. They catch the flash of the camera or reflect infrared light and appear as floating shapes. The camera, they pick them up because that's what cameras do, and boom, you get a ghost orb. Okay, the next tool we're talking about is infrasound. Infrasound refers to sound frequencies so low you can't consciously hear them. So think of that sound around 19 hertz. Your body, however, can feel them. They can get your chest to vibrate, your stomach to turn, and even, get this, get your eyeballs to resonate just enough to create visual distortions. In one famous case, a scientist working in a haunted lab actually found that a ventilation fan was producing infrasound at exactly that same frequency. Obviously, he turned it off and the ghost sightings basically went away. Finally, carbon monoxide. This is a silent killer, but it's also a master illusionist. When your brain is starved of oxygen, hallucinations can start fast. You might see figures or hear whispers, even feel dread. In fact, a CDC report from a few years back documented dozens of cases where people believed their homes were haunted until it was found that they had carbon monoxide inside their homes, and that appeared to be the real culprit. So saying all that, what does it mean? Many of the sensations we associate with ghosts and cold chills and voices, the shadows that make us feel uneasy, it can often be replicated by very normal, very measurable phenomena. Ghost stories become kind of ghost data. Once you ask the right questions, that's where the truth comes out. Let's talk about information in general. Not in the computer science sense, but I mean information as in you. Your memories, your neural patterns, the full shape of your thoughts and personality, everything that makes you feel like, you. Is that just electricity in the brain, or is it something more permanent? Here's what physics tells us. Energy doesn't die. When a star burns out, it becomes heat, radiation, mass. When your body dies, it's broken down into atoms, nutrients, even heat, even sound. But what about the pattern? The precise organization of your neurons, your memories, your identity. Physics has an unsolved mystery about this, and it starts in the darkest place imaginable, a black hole. For decades, scientists believed that once matter or light entered a black hole, it was basically gone forever. But quantum mechanics said that is impossible. So in essence, who's right? In 2024, a group of physicists introduced something called the soft hair theorem. It suggested that black holes don't delete information, they actually just shred it. It's like feeding a book into a paper shredder. I mean, you can't read the story anymore. The information technically still exists. Some researchers now believe this principle might actually apply everywhere. That information, any information, can never truly vanish. Not even yours. Now, don't get too excited. We're not saying you get uploaded to a cosmic USB stick, but it does raise some possibilities. Cryonics labs are preserving brains in liquid nitrogen, and neuroscientists are racing to map every single neural connection, the so-called connectome, and AI companies are already building digital avatars from people's old messages and voice clips and photos. If we could preserve everything about you, would that still be you, or just data with your face on it? Now, critics say energy might be conserved, but identity isn't. It's like a smoothie. You can measure the calories, but you never separate the banana from the strawberries again. So maybe your essence, the full you, vanishes when the brain shuts down. Or maybe some whisper of your pattern still lingers and exists, whether it's fragmented, shredded, but never quite erased. So whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or something in between, do you think consciousness survives death? I want you to scroll down, leave a comment, cast a vote in the poll if I have one. I'd love to hear your take. You're serious, speculative, or spiritual. Until then, stay curious.